Hello, national readers and national listeners, to another episode of the podcast. Happy Friday. Happy Friday, Abby.
Hello, happy Friday.
Yes, so we've got Abby Garton-Crosby with us today, political reporter, and myself, Laura Pollock, multimedia reporter for The National. And yeah, we'll just get right into it.
Yes, we have a very big story today because 4:00 last night, the UK COVID inquiry published its second report, I believe, into, looking at what happened during the pandemic, which I'm sure we all remember. But it was a pretty savage report when it came to...
It's a pretty big report, 300 plus pages.
Yes, and I did, when it dropped at 4:00, because in London, the London journalists all got a lock-in to read it before the embargo was broken, but obviously we were not there.
For folk who might not know, what exactly is a lock-in?
Essentially what it is you get the document ahead of time and you're essentially locked in a room. I mean, you probably could leave if you really wanted to, but the point is you're locked in and you get a kind of hard copy of it.
Right.
You get to read it and then you prep for the 4:00 embargo to be lifted. So at 4:00, all of these stories came flooding out, and we had to kind of scramble last night to figure out what the main takeaways were and, where Scotland comes into it. Because obviously, as a Scottish newspaper, I'm looking for the words Scottish Government, Nicola Sturgeon, and Gold Command, which we'll get into in a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so the key takeaway, it seemed to be, was that the failure to take COVID-19 seriously cost 23,000 lives in the first wave of the pandemic in England alone.
In England alone, that's just an astounding number. So they basically had done some modelling that if Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings and all the people we'll get into in a little moment had acted faster during this period, it would have cut deaths in the first wave of the pandemic by 48%.
Yeah.
So basically just under half. And now we'll get into this a little bit, I'm sure as well, that Michael Gove and other people have come out and said, they're trying to rewrite history and, they're trying to make us look bad. And it's like, well, I mean, come on, this is a public inquiry that's been going on for a long time. They've gone over a lot of evidence. They have done this modelling, and it's quite clear from we watched the evidence. I've watched some of the evidence that was given as well, that it was just utterly chaotic in Number 10. I mean, we know that because of Partygate, but to see it in black and white and in this giant report of basically about how chaotic Boris Johnson's leadership in Number 10 was, and Dominic Cummings is so toxic and so outrageous that many thousand people died because they weren't able to respond properly. It's just astounding to me.
It really is. And that's the thing, like these people, when I read it, I thought, I think this has a different impact on Scots because it is just English death. So it's a little bit less close to home, I suppose, for maybe some of our readers and listeners. But 23,000, that's it, like that, every single one of them is a person. And it's really quite horrific because we all sort of knew at the time that people were dying needlessly during the virus, but to then actually have a number to attribute to it is, I'm positive a lot of families, and I know at least that we've seen quite a few of the like coalitions of families and
the COVID bereaved groups.
Yes, the groups coming out to say we're going to hold the government to account because Scottish and the UK, because of this new evidence sort of thing.
I mean, that's the lives that, fewer deaths, but when you see the kind of, I think it's in London, there's the COVID memorial of how many lives lost, and it's just so many.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's one of those things where it really does cut teeth. I mean, there are probably not somebody listening here, everybody has known somebody who was affected or who lost their life during that, and obviously, while we don't have specific Scottish figures, people could have family down in England. It's just astounding. And one of the kind of, obviously, because I'm a political journalist and I'm looking at, obviously, the political response to it. And Boris Johnson presiding over a toxic culture, Number 10. Now, the one thing that stuck out to me about this is, now we all know about Dominic Cummings, who is probably, bar Alistair Campbell, one of the most known spads in Number 10 because of, how he was, because of Barnard Castle and his the eye test, sorry. The story just still boggles my mind, but that's not what I want to get into right now. Basically, this report says that not only did he contribute to the toxic and sexist workplace culture at the heart of the UK government, he was accused of using offensive, sexualised and misogynistic language, launching a misogynistic attack on a senior civil servant. And then Baroness Hallett, who was the chair of this inquiry, basically said that he poisoned the atmosphere in Number 10 and kind of created this culture of fear. But she even said that he strayed so far from his role as chief advisor that he was making decisions that Boris Johnson should have made.
We all kind of knew at the time.
How was that even possible?
Oh, it just that's the question, you know. And last night, on Question Time, folk were calling for Boris Johnson to sort of be dragged in front of Parliament and made to answer for. You could call it crimes, you know. You really could call it a crime.
He has said nothing.
He has said nothing, and there's been
Dominic Cummings.
Yeah, no apologies, no, yeah.
Yeah, the Tories are going to have a hard time dealing with this, I think. As you said, you were watching Question Time last night, and there was a Tory MP who just was asked repeatedly to apologise.
Yeah, Joe Robertson, MP for Isle of Wight East. He, someone basically one of the members of the audience put to him, "Can you just say sorry?" And it was a really poignant moment. Can you just say something? Can you just say sorry? And his defence was that he wasn't personally in government at the time, and he wasn't going to apologise on behalf of a government he wasn't part of.
Or would it have done if he just said so?
That's the thing, yeah. I understand, like, you know, there are those things, and if you apologise, then you have sort of you admit you're complicit, and then that can have ramifications in terms of legal things, and you know, blah blah blah. But yeah,
I think with something like this, I don't think it would be too big a stretch. It's pretty shameless, to be honest, to kind of do that. But also, you know, we have heard a lot about Partygate. We've heard a lot about what the Tories did in Number 10, which also you can all read all the download on this website if you don't fancy rifling through 300 pages of the UK COVID inquiry's report. But we did get some stuff about Scotland and the other devolved nations, which was pretty interesting for us, and led to Nicola Sturgeon putting a statement out last night. So I think it was quite interesting because they said that Sturgeon was a serious and diligent leader, but the response from the Scottish Government was still inadequate. It still kind of wasn't up to scratch. And there's this whole sort of issue around these gold command structures that she'd had, which was basically Nicola Sturgeon, John Swinney, and a couple other people in a little circle kind of making decisions, and the cabinet was sort of cut out of that decision-making process. Nicola Sturgeon has denied that, and she says she stands by how she did it because she wanted to lead from the front, I think is what she told the press yesterday, that buck stops with her, so she was making all the main decisions basically because, you know, she would be the one held accountable for them. But it is interesting to that. I remember being in London once, and a former SNP MP, and I will not tell you who it was, told me that, and this is not even related to COVID, that there was a triangle of power when Nicola Sturgeon talked about this before, haven't we?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we've talked about it, but yeah, it's pretty wide known that it was such a centralised little circle at the top of triangle. Sorry, triangle.
So I'm like doing this. It
was no bigger than a square.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty well known that when Nicola Sturgeon was in charge, there was a kind of tight group of people around her who were making the decisions and who were in charge. But it was interesting that it wasn't just the Scottish Government that's kind of criticised for this. Although Mark Drakeford got a good review in
Wales.
Well, yeah, they were like, yeah, he just kind of opened up to everybody, and they went for like a, you know, consensus type approach. So COVID inquiry, so that was a good approach. But what was interesting is that they said Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland basically all relied too heavily on the UK government, and obviously because the UK government clearly had no idea what it was doing.
Yeah,
that
the blind leading the blind, basically. Yeah.
So
it's interesting because then you could just sort of, you know, put it back to, well, we have to rely, you know, in a way. But I guess then health is devolved, so they should have had more planning.
Yeah, I think all the issue comes around that they had done preparedness planning, but it was for flu. I think it wasn't for the type of virus that the pandemic became, so it was not just what anybody was expecting to come. But you can see that, you know, there were some serious issues in the UK government, and Nicola Sturgeon did put out like a pretty lengthy statement last night, which you can also read on the website, where she basically said that she still thinks every day about the decisions she took, and that she'll carry an acute sense of responsibility for this for the rest of my life. So she's obviously come out defending herself yesterday in Holyrood, but has admitted that mistakes were made. And Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes speaking to MSPs yesterday about half an hour after the report came out, which the Tories were saying we could have given us more time to read it. And Kate Force was like, well, if I hadn't, then you would have called me here anyway. So she said they're going to look at some sort of group to kind of assess the findings and make sure that, they can learn from what happened. So I think it's really important that obviously the bereaved families have their say, because, they have been calling for this, to call for the inquiry, and the UK COVID-19 bereaved families said that it was vindicating to see Boris Johnson blamed in black and white for his catastrophic mishandling, but it's devastating to think of the lives that could have been saved under a different Prime Minister, which I think we should probably leave the COVID stuff on that, because they do have a point there.
Well, I think it can lead quite nicely into our next point, because you as a voter never know. We do not have a crystal ball in front of us. We never know what the people we elect will face. We didn't know that the pandemic was coming. Who knows? If the public had any sort of idea that was coming, would they have chosen Boris Johnson to lead that response? You just don't know what's going to happen. And so the fact that at the moment we have Labour in power, and they're moving towards at least echoing what the far right are saying in terms of immigration and such, you never know who's going to be in power next. And I think we're looking at legislation and laws and policies that are getting put into practice at the moment under Labour. But if they were to, say, be under Nigel Farage or Reform, they could be used potentially in a much more damaging way.
Yes. Now, this is Shabana Mahmood's, the Home Secretary's new immigration reforms that we've had coming out over the past week. Now, I think we've spoken about this before on the podcast, that while immigration is not a kind of top issue for people in Scotland, it is sort of creeping up the agenda, and you can tell that a lot of that's because of the media issues. But this is an issue that isn't going away, and Shabana Mahmood's attempt to, I'm not quite sure what our attempt here is. It's not really to out-reform. It seems to be to kind of try and crack down on immigration. But
yeah, I think that her, at least from what I can gather, her way of thinking, which I think is, I might go into it in a little bit about her actual approach to all of this, but I think her aim right now, I would say, is to take away a lot of the pull factors that asylum seekers are seeing and wanting to come to the UK. I think that's basically what she's wanting to do: cut out so many pull factors, and in that way reduce folk coming illegally. Yeah,
it's basically trying to, basically what she's announced is, so one day we had what they describe as illegal migrants, people who either come across the channel on a small boat, English Channel on a small boat, or kind of arrive in trucks and things like that. Basically, people who are risking their lives in order to seek safety in the UK had a serious kind of crackdown. So those who would come here and apply for asylum, so that would have been, I think, 20 years that people would now have to wait under these plans to be able to, apply for asylum. Let me check that.
Yes. Yeah, it's 20.
It's 20 years. And then yesterday we had so her basically her reforms for legal migration, which is people who want to come here and want to work. Now, bearing in mind that we have a population issue in the UK, and particularly in Scotland, where our population is declining, and after Brexit, a lot of the jobs that would be filled by European workers are now not being filled. So we do need people in the UK, whereas at the moment we are getting, a lot of chat against this. So what she said is, immigrants will only be eligible for benefits and social housing if they become British citizens. And, basically what that is doing is essentially creating a sort of two-tier society there, because you're basically telling people they have to earn their right to be part of the UK, and they have to pass the British citizenship. And also, it's very expensive to get British citizenship. As somebody whose friend recently got one, it costs a lot of money to apply for that. So I don't know how they're going to expect people to deal with that either if they're not allowed to work while they're citizens. Whole other point. Anyway, so what were your key takeaways from what Shabana Mahmood said this week, Laura?
Well, I think the thing, like I said, she wants to take away the pull factors, but she also wants it to be seen as it's not easy to become a British citizen, and it's not easy to get settled status. So you really do have to earn it. And that's what is now, it's sort of, I think that's basically the term they're trying to coin, is earned settlement. And when they're talking about that the benefits are going to get restricted, it means that they're not going to be eligible for social housing and such like that. And that's basically the things that, Reform UK are calling for, but also then we're seeing far right actors do, those are the hot topic issues that people who are living in poverty, deprived at the moment, are then seeing folk in hotels and getting everything paid for, and it's such a connect to them, and it feels as though this rhetoric and the stirring up of the anti-migrant movement is just writing government policy at this point. I don't know. It seems as though a lot of folk are also saying that Shabana Mahmood previously was not this hard on it. Yvette Cooper was also not that hard on it prior to coming into the role. She was former Home Secretary, and it does seem as though in the Home Office there is just a sort of what's the word I'm looking for? When you're sort of initiated into something, a radicalization of thought against asylum seekers, and this is the way to do it. There seems to be no original thought or new ideas or a more humane approach to reforming the system. It's like, these are the only way to reform it, is to make it harder, give more paperwork to civil servants, and to almost just, the system is already so messed up and is such a large web, and it doesn't seem to be that a lot of this will simplify it. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm getting from it, is that it's sort of just, they're ploughing ahead with things that Priti Patel and the Conservative government had already proposed. They're just ploughing ahead with that in the Home Office. Doesn't matter who's at the helm of it, and not giving much thought or even sort of looking at what think tanks are saying or charities are saying, or listening to people on the grounds. And granted, Shabana Mahmood went up in the UK government into the House of Commons and sort of said, I am attacked for how I look, and I get abuse on the street, and that is completely fair, and she probably does, she might, who knows, but I don't think that qualifies her to then turn around and not give any thought to a different way of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that were coming out earlier in the week, that basically Labour ministers were having to stand up there and defend confiscating jewellery from asylum seekers. I just done, and my perspective is like, where have we lost the kind of humanity in this? Because that does give some, not to be Gary Lineker here, some echoes of 1930s Germany. By confiscating, I was like, don't want to get sacked, but I'm not on the BBC. So we see those sorts of things, like the dehumanization of asylum seekers, and it is essentially coming from reform and from the far right. And as you said, they are essentially kind of wagging the dog of the wagging the tail of the Home Office. I can't talk today. Wagging the tail of the Home Office.
Say that one more time. Just
wagging the tail of the Home Office. So, it is like, it's really concerning to see the direction of travel that we're kind of going in with this, I think, because obviously in Scotland, it's not as big a concern. It's growing up the concerns, but it's not as big a concern. And obviously I've spoken a few times to Colcav Stewart, the migration minister, about community cohesion. We've got the issue coming up with Cameron Barracks, of them being housed there, and I've had an interview with an expert at Aberdeen Uni that'll be in the paper over the weekend and on the website, which is kind of looking at this militarization by putting asylum seekers out in a military barracks. That's not going to solve the problem with hotels by again putting them outside of the communities that they should be in. So, yeah, the Home Office approach to this seems very harsh, and I guess we're going to have to see where it goes and what the voters say if this is what they want.
That's again the thing. Yeah. If we know the public are tired. We know that there's fatigue around this whole situation. There's fatigue about talking about it, to be honest. There's fatigue about the approach, and that there's no solutions after it being so long on at the top of people's minds. And so it's understandable in ways that people are just sort of like, just deal with it, just get it sorted.
Yeah, so obviously Shabana Mahmood's not the only UK government minister we're here to talk about today, because Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, she had a bit of an interesting comment she made to a Scottish businessman, didn't she, that's kind of come out this week. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I saw there was a report last night. I personally laughed. I think a lot of our readers enjoyed it on socials and such. Rachel Reeves was up in Aberdeenshire. She was visiting North Sea gas terminal, and she was meeting with... Sorry.
I was just going to St Fergus.
Yes, St Fergus.
Got to get the very terminal in there.
And she was meeting a local businessman, and she was invited to tea and sandwiches and having a little chat. And she apparently is said to have glared at one of the business people, telling them, "Talk to me with respect. I'm the Chancellor of the Exchequer." Now, this was reported in the Financial Times, and
in a much more sensible way than we covered it.
Yeah, definitely. But that's kind of the crux of it, that, you know, she's faced a lot of criticism in recent weeks from a lot of sources within the UK government about pre-budget conversations, and there's been so much, and she's U-turned without even having official things in the pipeline. So maybe she's just having a bit of a moment.
Well, there was a really long kind of fluff piece, I would call it. Puff piece, not a fluff piece. Puff piece. In the Times today, where obviously one of their journalists has been kind of following her about for a wee while, kind of just doing repeated interviews. There was a mention of some fluffy slippers in the Chancellor's office.
So that's where you got fluffy from, Puff.
That is where I got fluffy from, yeah.
There you go.
My brain's making some weird connections today. Anyway, so it was just a really long piece, and I was reading it, and I was thinking, I feel like I know nothing about this. I mean, like, I don't know if there's, you know, she obviously struggles to get across that any sort of form of personality, and I think that is like one of the problems, that she won't give anything away. And I think one of the quotes is like, well, she doesn't really have it to give away. I think like that might be the problem. But anyway, not to get, I'm not personally attacking Rachel Reeves there. I just think, you know, she is the Chancellor. She needs to be able to communicate these big issues to the public. And she is incredibly unpopular.
She's incredibly unpopular. And then that's the thing. If she is saying to someone, "Talk to me with respect," having to be so direct,
shows a little bit of insecurity, that, doesn't it?
I think so. And we can't, like you say, we can't psychoanalyze a woman. We don't know.
We've never
But as the first female Chancellor, I'm sure it must be so difficult for her.
Pressure would be incredible.
Off the charts. And so you can understand where the insecurities come from, and you can understand all of it, but she has been caught out so many times in lies or stretching the truth or not getting something right, and the pressure must be immense. And I can completely understand where the insecurities come from, and the fact that she is probably questioned where a man isn't questioned so often. But she has been caught out on so many lies, so many things where she stretched the truth or not got things right. And, you know, even like, what was it? It was during the summer. She was so close to losing her job, and Starmer had to come out and say, "No, I stand by her." And she must be feeling it so extreme right now, ahead of the budget.
It's a make or break budget, this one, I think. Like for both of them, I think. I think it's going to be what comes out of this. We had so many, you can tell, because we've had so many briefings and so many U-turns on those briefings, never mind all the whiz straighting leadership stuff.
Oh god, yeah.
The whole income tax thing, and the whole talking about the fiscal headroom and all these things that are not communicating well enough to the public what that means, because all people are hearing is, "I'm going to take more money out of your pay packet." When you have people like Zach Polanski who are saying, "We can tax the billionaires. We need to tax a tiny amount of the billionaires and not take it from working people," and that is cutting through. I said to you yesterday, I couldn't believe that 100,000 people had joined the Greens since he took over 10 weeks ago.
Yeah. And what was the figure that the
4 million pounds.
4 million in donations.
The Huffington Post had that.
Yeah.
So they think that's giving them about 4 million pounds in donations. Labour must be absolutely scared. I nearly said a worse word there.
No,
but Labour must be quite scared.
Don't worry. We can say they're shitting themselves.
Yeah, they're shitting themselves. Sorry. So basically, they must be, because that is what you would, that is the policy you would expect from a left-wing party. That is what people want to hear. And the antithesis of that is obviously Nigel Farage on the other side, who has no economic policies whatsoever, other than, do you want to buy some gold bullion that I've definitely got a sponsorship deal with? It's definitely not a con. So, this is going to be a make or break budget for them, and they really need to, if they're wanting to keep their jobs, I think they're going to have to make some really hard decisions, because at the same time as telling us they're going to, raise income tax or raise all these other different things that are going to hit working people, they're saying, oh, well, we might actually finally scrap the 2-child benefit cap, and we're not going to do those welfare reforms that are going to save money. So they're going to have to explain to people where the cuts are coming from, instead of saying, oh, we're going to tax you, I'm announcing all these additional things, because people don't want children in poverty, that is for sure, but you also need to explain to them how they're not going to be impacted by it, because that is why the right wing and why the left wing, the both really, both sides of the strand are coming from Labour, who are trying to sit in the centre and please everybody, and it's not working.
Yeah, it's not working. And that's
that really rapid analysis of why I think Rachel Reeves is in trouble with this budget.
Well, I think then that is why that comment, talk to me with respect, gives us a little bit of insight into where her head is at, and the fact that she must be, it must drain on you mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that job.
You wouldn't want that job, but the fact that she is feeling like that, I'm sure a lot of politicians have been in similar positions where they've still felt respected, but that is just...
Well, that's the thing, she needs to lay down her authority, and she needs to kind of find however she's going to have her authority, because, you never heard more about that from like Gordon Brown or any other Labour chancellors when they're doing those sorts of things. They just had the authority, and whether or not she thinks the sexism plays into it, which, to be honest, I'm probably sure that it does, because that industry is full of men, as we all know. It's heavily dominated by men. But it's interesting that, Labour and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves both are very quick to U-turn. They try and put down the authority, and then people push back and they go, okay, sorry, no. That's not having command of the benches as they should do, as we saw by the welfare rebellion. There just isn't that confidence that I'm going to actually do these things. They like to say it, but their actions tell a different story.
The follow through. Yeah. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up. Thank you so much for taking time out of a busy Friday to chat.
Yes, it's nice to spend time with you on a Friday afternoon.
I know, it's nice. So for the rest of today, this weekend, and next week, we have our Black Friday sale. It is 1 year for £20. Very, very good bargain. I know that a lot of folk have sort of panned the idea of Black Friday sales, so in the office we're calling it St Andrew's Day sale as well. It concludes on December 1st, but get in there quick. And
we've got a big election coming up next year, everybody.
Big election, World Cup, Commonwealth Games.
Okay, I love how you go World Cup and I'm like, election. There's an election. Politics reporter all around me. Big busy year, and you can get all the coverage. So just subscribe on our website and follow us on socials. And if you do enjoy the podcast, we wouldn't mind a little like or a little review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. It would be much appreciated. So thank you so much for listening.